everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am here to bring you guys my end of April reading wrap up. I read a total of 25 books in April, just like in March. These past couple of months have been crazy with Cinderella and everything else going on. May is going to be kind of crazy as well because I work for a music and dance studio. I teach a few classes there and our yearly showcase is happening in just a few weeks. So things are getting crazy with that, but I still think I'm gonna have a lot more time to read in May, which is so exciting because of course I love reading and I want to spend as much time as possible doing that. So today I have, let's see, I think I have 12 books to talk about today, and I think I talked about 13 books in my mid-month wrap up. I promise Get Ready With Me style wrap ups are coming back, hopefully in May, but I've just been really tired lately. I don't know, I've been getting back into a workout routine, and so I think that's why I'm just so tired all the time, because I'm doing that now. A few of the books that I'm talking about in today's wrap up I discussed at length in my most recent reading vlog. I will of course link that up in the cards above if you are interested. I did a reading vlog where I was just reading some of Samantha's favorite historical romances, Samantha from Books with Samantha, and I was reading other books as well and taking you guys behind the scenes of Cinderella. I loved how that vlog turned out. But yeah, so a few of these books, the first few books that I'm going to talk about in this video, I have discussed in that vlog already. So without further ado, let's just jump on into it. So the first book I want to discuss is Married by Morning by Lisa Kleypas. This is book 4 in her Hathaway series. Hands down my favorite series that I've read by Lisa Kleypas, though I have not read her Ravenel series yet, and I've heard a lot of amazing things about that series as well. But all 4 books that I have read in this series have been 5-star reads for me, which is not the norm for me when it comes to Lisa Kleypas. Yes, I've given quite a few of her books 5 stars, but I've also given quite a few of her books 4 stars. So the fact that all of the books that I've read in this series so far have been home runs for me is just amazing. And I was definitely looking forward to this book the most because we are finally getting Kat and Leo's story. Leo is the one brother in the Hathaway's family. And this was a hate to love romance that had been building in the first 3 books of the series, or at least like the last couple of books, because I know definitely in Seduce Me and at Sunrise and Tempt Me at Twilight, we saw Kat and Leo's interesting, tumultuous relationship being featured quite a bit. And so yeah, I was just so excited for them to finally have their romance in this book. And I will say, I said this in my vlog, this wasn't quite what I expected, just because I feel like the animosity between Kat and Leo in this book maybe dissolved too quickly, or it became too serious too fast, because what I loved about their dynamic in those previous books that I mentioned is that they were just so funny and entertaining, like the animosity between the two of them. But definitely by the middle towards the end, I was convinced of how amazing this book and their romance is, and I just love reading romances where both characters are reluctant to falling for each other because of their past. That's definitely what's going on in this book. It was amazing. It was beautiful. Also, I have to show the step back because it's so pretty. I love Kat and Leo so much, and I cannot wait to read the 5th and final book, Love in the Afternoon. I'll probably read it at some point in May. Next up, we have a reread, and that was The Devil of Downtown by Joanna Shupe. This is book 3 in her Uptown Girls series. This is a series that takes place during the Gilded Age, so the 1890s in New York City. And this was my first time rereading this series, and the first time I read the books, The Prince of Broadway was my favorite of the series, but upon reread I can confirm that this is my favorite of the series, and I think objectively it is the best romance of the 3 books. I am obsessed with Jack Mulligan, the hero in this. He's arguably my favorite Joanna Shupe hero, though it's hard for me to choose between him and Kit from The Lady Gets Lucky. They're just 2 kind of pretty different types of heroes from Joanna Shupe, but we love a morally gray, villainous hero who is just charming and hot. Like, come on. I'm pretty sure that Jack Mulligan is based off of the main character from like Peaky Blinders. Is that the show on Netflix? I need to watch that show. But I know that Joanna adores that series, so I'm pretty sure that was the inspiration for Jack. And I really like Justine as well. I feel like she's one of the most relatable heroines of Joanna Shoops, and it's fantastic. If you haven't read this series yet, I highly, highly recommend that you do. And if you haven't read anything from Joanna Shoup yet, I would recommend starting with this series for sure. Next were the two books that I read that are some of Samantha's favorite historical romances. So the first one is The Spitfire by Christy Caldwell. This is technically book 5 in a series, but this one definitely stands on its own. I never really felt confused in terms of like other characters that were mentioned or storylines or anything like that. I was excited about this one because it is a romance between Clara, who was a former sex worker. She was also a former madam of her own brothel. And she rescues Henry, our hero, who is this like starchy earl, this buttoned up man, the opposite of Clara in every way possible. But Henry gets like attacked and left for dead in the streets in London. And so Clara actually saves him from the men that are trying to kill him. Like, she literally has a gun and she is not afraid to use it. And so she nurses him back to health. And I loved that first part of the book, but I do unfortunately feel like this book didn't focus enough on these two characters bonding and falling in love with each other. I feel like this book focused a lot more on the non-romance plot, which I don't want to get into. So that was a bit disappointing, I'm not gonna lie. I gave this 3.5 stars. Also, there's only one sex scene in this, and it's just your very typical run-of-the-mill type of sex scene, which I felt was odd because the hero is also a virgin, which I love virgin heroes in my romances. I adore that trope so much. So I expected there to be scenes where Clara would be teaching Henry about sex and intimacy and all of that, but that doesn't happen. So again, this book just didn't quite serve what I wanted it to. And then the other favorite of Samantha's that I read was Ravished by Amanda Quick. I am so happy that I finally read this book and I finally read from this author. There's a couple of other books in Amanda Quick's backlist that I definitely want to get to at some point, but this one's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I love those types of retellings in a historical romance setting. And so we have Harriet, who is a paleontologist. That definitely gave me A Week to Be Wicked vibes by Tessa Dare, because Minerva in that book is also a paleontologist. And then the hero is Gideon. He is known as the Beast of Blackthorn Hall. He has basically been rumored to be the cause of his fiance committing suicide some years earlier. So yeah, he does not have the best reputation. And so basically it turns into a forced marriage of convenience situation between Harriet and Gideon. And what I will say this book has going for it is just how devoted Harriet becomes to Gideon and how she falls for him and how she defends his honor, because there are so many scenes in this book where people are just talking about Gideon. They'll just go up to Harriet and straight up ask her, like, why are you with this man? He's terrible, he's awful, and he's ugly because he has scars. And she just defends him to them, and that's just iconic. Like, she's a very fierce and bold and brave heroine in that way. Gideon, I liked him, I didn't love him. I do feel like he had a little bit of like the old school historical romance hero syndrome, in that, I don't know, maybe he was a little misogynistic. Just some of the things he would say to Harriet and maybe the way that he would treat her. He didn't treat her bad by any means. It was just like a little bit like, I don't know that I love that. You know, just very much an old school historical romance. But I will say this is a good old school historical romance to read if you've never read historicals that were written before the year 2000. I do think that this is kind of a good one to dip your toe in, because I've read some that are absolutely bonkers and crazy and like terrible, but this one I think is definitely one of the better ones that I have read. And like I said, I am looking forward to checking out more from this author. It's just, for me, I don't know that old school historicals are my vibe, are my thing. I've read a couple that I've really enjoyed, but for the most part, I don't know that they're necessarily for me. So yeah, I also wanted to throw that out there. So next up, I wanted to talk about the two books that I was reading for the SJM along. If you don't know, Jen from the Book Refuge basically organized this like year-long read-along where we are reading all of Sarah J Maas's books in publication order. So in the first half of April, we read Throne of Glass, and we read the first novella in The Assassin's Blade, which is, this is a bind up of prequel novellas. And then in the later half of April, we read Crown of Midnight, which is book 2 in the Throne of Glass series, and then the second novella in, once again, this bind up. So I'll just talk about these little novellas first. The first novella is The Assassin and the Pirate Lord. I think this is one of the better novellas in this bind up. I think the pacing is really well done. It's really cool to see Selena and Sam go toe to toe with Captain Rolfe, who is this pirate captain, and it's just, there's a lot of like good action scenes, and there's just, you learn a lot about Selena and Sam and who they are and all of that. And yeah, so I gave that one 4 stars, and then The Assassin and the Healer is the second novella in the bind up. This one is also the shortest novella. I think it's just about 30 to 40 pages. We get to meet Yrene in this novella, but other than that, there's not too much going on in that novella, so I gave it 3 stars. By the way, I am rereading all of Sarah J Maas's books for the first time right now, doing this read along, which is so exciting. So yeah, not much to say about these bind ups, but I do think that they add something to the world and to the characters. So I still would recommend that you read them as a part of this read along, or even if you're not doing the read along. But yeah, they're not anything spectacular either. And so yeah, then we read the Crown of Midnight, book 2 of the series, and just like with the first time that I read this, I gave this 4 stars. Definitely Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight are the weakest books of the series. However, I feel like I enjoyed this more upon reread. Because I knew how the romance in this was going to turn out, I didn't put as much stock in it. Like, I didn't invest as much into it. And so I feel like I could enjoy just the general story more, and I was looking for foreshadowing and clues and world building and different things like that. So I feel like overall I definitely just had a more enjoyable reading experience. And I remember the first time that I read this, being very frustrated by Selena's character, our main character, just because I felt like her character development was very stagnant. She's very, very stubborn in this book, and she just like refuses to listen to people. And this time around, I also just kind of gave Selena a break. You know, she's still a teenager in this book, and this time I just really understood more where she was coming from and why she was so stubborn. And her being stubborn and not wanting to listen to people is a very important part of her character development that goes into book 3, Heir of Fire. So yeah, overall, I just really enjoyed this book for what it was upon reread. This very much still feels like a very YA fantasy series, but I still think it's a really good bridge book between Throne of Glass and Heir of Fire. Next up, I finally read One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a book that has been on my TBR for years at this point. Like, I probably bought this copy at least 2 years ago, probably around the time that I read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo for the first time. That was way back in 2018. And so this book just really stood out to me because of the premise, because it's bonkers. So if you don't know what this book is about, we have Emma. She marries her high school sweetheart, Jesse, but a year after they get married, he disappears. He was in like a helicopter accident. Basically, his helicopter goes missing over the Pacific, so he's gone. And he's been gone for 2+ years, something like that. It got to a point where he was declared dead. They never found a body or anything, but by that point, so much time had gone by that he was declared dead. Then Emma moves back to her hometown, and she reconnects with Sam, who was another guy that she went to high school with. So they fall in love and they end up getting engaged, but oops, Jesse's actually alive, and he finds his way back to Emma. And so things go on from there. This is a crazy plot, like I said, a really, really, really well done love triangle. Love triangles are not my favorite thing. I would much rather read a polyamory romance, but I thought that this was very well done. I really liked how this played out. As usual with Taylor Jenkins Reid, stunning, beautiful writing. Every time I read one of her books, I'm just reminded of how talented she is and how I just need to read more and more and more from her backlist. I do have a little gripe with this book though. I think that the ending was a bit rushed. I would have liked for us to have been able to spend just a little bit more time with the couple that ends up together. I feel like they reunited and then we got maybe like a short little epilogue and then the book was over. You know, this is only like an 8-hour audiobook, so it's actually a pretty short novel when you think about it. So I just wish that we would have had a little bit more time to just like sit with the ending. And yeah, but I still thought it was beautiful and I gave it 4 stars. Next up, I had to read 2 more novellas by Cassie Mintz. These are both a part of her Big Boys series. So the first one that I read was Big Biker. This one is about Samson and Ivy. And the plot's fun for this one because Ivy is basically being forced into an arranged marriage by her parents. They are very, very wealthy people. Then we have Samson, who is this big dude who rides a motorcycle. He is a private investigator. And so Samson and Ivy end up meeting because Samson goes to this hotel to deliver a file to one of his clients, and Ivy and her family just happen to be eating at the restaurant at that same hotel, and so things go on from there. I mean, you know, don't we all love a bad boy biker romance? I gave this one 4 stars. It is not one of my favorite novellas that I've read by Cassie Mintz, but I had a really good time with it and I would recommend it, especially if you love big boy romances. And the other one that I read in this series is Big Boxer, which I did give this one 5 stars. Oh my God, this was so good. Also, I'm pretty sure this one featured a curvy heroine. Not a lot of her novellas feature curvy heroines, so when they do, I get really excited. But this one's really fun. This one is about Beck and Lucas. So Lucas is this really famous boxer that Beck has had a crush on for years. There's definitely an age gap between the two of them. And he's now getting to a point where I guess he's getting towards the end of his career as a boxer. And Beck notices that he doesn't have the spark that he used to have when he was younger when it comes to his fighting, and so she writes an article about him. She works for like this sports blog, and so he comes and finds her and confronts her about the article, and things go on from there. And oh my God, this was just so good. This is just the vibe that I love from Cassie Mintz. Like, I love when her romances start kind of slightly antagonistic, especially on the hero's part, but then he meets the heroine and he like instantly falls in love. Like, she is the queen of insta love, and it's so good. Also the perfect amount of angst going on, and yes, highly, highly recommend this one. We have just a couple books left. Next, I read Not the Witch You Wed by April Asher. This is book 1 in a paranormal romance series, and this book definitely gave me slight vibes of Juliet Cross's Stay a Spell series. So the series that has like Wolf Gone Wild, Witches Get Stitches, Don't Hex and Drive, definitely gave me slight vibes of that for sure. So if you love those books, I think you would really enjoy this one. So this one is about Violet, who is a witch, and then we have Lincoln, who is a wolf shifter. He is like a leader of, I believe, like the North American wolf pack. And she's also pretty powerful as well. Like, she's a part of a very powerful witch family. And so there's a lot going on because this is a second chance romance, because when Lincoln and Violet were like teenagers, around like 18 years old, they had been childhood friends, and then they started something more, but Lincoln really, really broke Violet's heart. And so now it's years later, she hates his guts, and they basically go into this like fake dating, kind of fake mating situation, because it would benefit the both of them to have a mate. And so while Violet still definitely kind of hates Lincoln, she agrees to this, and they just can't deny their chemistry for one another. I will say, though this book mentions sex a lot, it's not a very steamy book, which was just like a teensy bit disappointing for me. I just expected this book to be a bit sexier than it actually was. But I really, really enjoyed the romance between Lincoln and Violet. I am a sucker for witch/wolf shifter romances, and this one was just really well done. I also really liked all of the side characters, and I can kind of see where the author is matching up other couples that are going to come up later in the series. So I cannot wait to read more from this author, and I cannot wait to read more from this series. I gave this 4 stars. All right, and last but certainly not least, this might be my top favorite book that I read in April, which is really saying something because I did read some really great romances this month. Heated Rivalry by Rachel Reed. Now this is technically book 2 in an hockey romance series, but you definitely don't need to read book 1. I didn't read book 1. I had just heard so many people just rave and rave and rave about this romance, that it's like one of their favorite sports romances, one of their favorite romances ever. People have been really hyping up this book. And so I decided to just finally pick it up in April, kind of on a whim. This definitely was not on my TBR or anything like that. I'm so glad that I did. This was such an easy 5-star for me. This is one of those books that as soon as I picked it up, I knew it was going to be a 5-star read, just because I really was vibing with Rachel Reed's writing style. And so this is a pretty epic forbidden romance. So we have Ilya and Shane. They are both hockey players, like I said, but they both get drafted for teams that are rivals with each other. And so they want to hate each other, but they also can't deny this sexual tension and chemistry between one another. And so they kind of just start hooking up with each other when they're like 18, 19. They first get drafted onto their respective teams. And so this book takes place over the course of like 7 years. And so we see the two of them have these secret hookups because while it is becoming more accepted in the hockey industry for players to be gay, it's still not something that would be celebrated or widely accepted. And it also wouldn't be necessarily a good career move for them to be in love with their rival, you know? So there's just a lot of angst, definitely forbidden. And like I said, it takes place over 7 years, and you see these two fall so deeply in love with each other, and it's just beautiful. This had like the perfect balance of like swoony, like sweet and swoony moments and just like beautiful romance, but this was also very sexy. Lots and lots of steamy scenes in this for sure. And I felt like Rachel Reed did a really great job of writing the steamy scenes in that they never felt repetitive. This couple is amazing. My heart was aching so much for these two throughout. Yeah, like the pacing was perfect, the writing was perfect. I'm so excited because she did recently come out with a sequel called The Long Game, which is going to follow the same couple. And thank God, because this book ends definitely with like a happy for now ending. It's definitely not a happily ever after. So I cannot wait to read that sequel ASAP. All right, everyone, that's going to be it for my end of April reading wrap up. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I would love it if you would leave a comment down below if you want to discuss any of the books that I brought up in this video, or if you want to tell me about some of the books that you read in April. So I would love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you so much in advance if you do, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!